Close your eyes. It's after images.
You're listening to After Images, a podcast for cinephiles that takes a deep dive into moving images. Each episode features a special guest who is invited to explore a film of their choice. After Images is hosted by film writers Frank Bouleg and Marisa C. Hayes. What would you do if a pair of black suede shoes suddenly fell onto the telephone booth you are in? If you're a fan of Ricky Nelson with an immense pompadour, you would immediately add them to your stylish wardrobe. Tom DiCillo's 1991 directorial debut, Johnny Suede, featuring Brad Pitt as the title character, Catherine Keener as Yvonne, and Nick Cave as Freak Storm, takes the viewer on a wild ride through Johnny's quest to become a rock and roll star. Set to the music of rockabilly guitar legend Link Wray, Johnny Suede is atmospheric, hilarious, dreamy, and otherworldly. The film is a contemporary fairy tale crammed with charismatic characters that put Tom DiCillo on the map of important film directors to follow.
Our guest today is Daniel Knox, a singer-songwriter living and working in Porto, Portugal. He recently curated Moving Through Time, the films of David Lynch, at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. His new album, Mercado 48, is out now.
Hello, Daniel Knox. Welcome to After Images podcast. We're so happy you're here today to discuss Tom DiCillo's 1991 film, Johnny Suede.
Thanks for having me.
And as you know, we love to begin with the question, why did you choose this film? And can you tell us a little bit about maybe the first time that you saw Johnny Suede?
I can tell you a whole lot about the first time I saw it, but in terms of why I recommend it and why I chose this film, it's I don't know that I have any one answer to that question. Anybody who ends up being very close to me, I want to watch this movie with them, because it just feels like a film that sort of followed me around all my life. It's a film that I own on multiple formats, including VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, and even the video 8mm video copy that was played on airplanes. I bought the airline version of the film, and I have posters and everything like that. I keep finding different parts of myself in this film through the years, and as far as when I first saw it, I think I was first aware of it by seeing promos for it on Bravo TV, which is now just reality shows and things like that. But when I was a teenager, it showed a lot of independent film and European films, and it was the first place I saw a lot of things that I would have had no other way to see at that age. And so I remember seeing that they would run that sometimes, but I never really caught it on TV. I just saw images from it. And that's, of course, also where I saw Twin Peaks for the first time, because I didn't see it in its original run. I was too young. But the first time I watched it was on VHS in Carbondale, Illinois, in my sister and her husband's student housing apartment. And I had bought it from the local record store in Carbondale, Illinois, because Nick Cave was in it, and I thought that he was cool when I was 16 years old in 1996. And so I took it home, and then I watched it at least twice on the first day, and then I just kept watching it and kept kind of absorbing it. And I think at that age, I had pretty tall hair myself, and I had sideburns, and I was getting into Elvis and that kind of thing, and I think as a young man watching this movie about a young man who's sort of like dealing with the idea of what cool is and his own sort of weaknesses and things like that. It was it just spoke to me at that age very loudly. I saw myself in it, and I would see myself in it in different ways through the years as I got older.
Amazing. And as a musician, how influential was the film's musical references for you?
Oh, hugely. I couldn't get enough of that Ricky Nelson song, and I still can't. I love it. But the Jim Farmer music too is uh it's so understated and eerie and kind of beautiful in a but with a sense of humor to it. Like it never uh it's really special. It never veers too far, uh and it really is sort of bound to that image. I actually reached out to him at one point asking him for cues from the movie, and he was very nice and sent me a few things from on like I messaged him on Facebook at one point years ago, and he actually like sent me a few tracks that I knew very well but didn't have, and I sort of, I think annoyed him by not annoyed him, but I was pestering him about making it and things like that. And I when I was young, I actually made my own soundtrack to the movie. I by taping it with a cassette recorder next to the TV, and I drew my own art for it. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, but
Oh.
I made it. I even recorded like the Rent song that the landlord sings, and both, Johnny's version and Freakstorm's version of that song, and so that should give you an idea of my uh, devotion to that movie.
Fantastic that it was so rich and inspiring for you.
And did the fact that you were so in love with the film lead you to watch the rest of the films by Tom DiCillo?
Yeah, well, at the time I had no access to them, Uh, this was in like 95, 96. So um, I didn't see another Tom DiCillo film until Box of Moonlight played in
Mm.
Springfield, Illinois. We had an art theater there called the Fox Theater, and it was part of the Carasotes film chain. And I thought that whoever was running uh, the Fox Theater was like some, art person who was bringing, interesting works to uh, the Midwest. But really, now that I've, worked at a movie theater, I know that they make deals and they just we'll play this movie that we don't think people are going to see in this market, so that we can have more screens of this movie that, like Jurassic Park or whatever. But I went to see it just because I liked John Turturro,
Mm.
and I went with my dad, and that was a really interesting experience to watch that movie with my dad, just because of the father son relationship in that, and there were echoes of that in my own relationship with my dad, and like who I wanted to be and who he was and who he thought he was, and that whole thing.
Mm.
But that was the second one I saw, and then when I saw his name on it, I knew, and then um, when I moved to Chicago, I had more access to movies and I got to see more things. So
And the film itself has this very strong fairy tale aspect, this kind of absurd action of the shoes falling out of the apartment, of Brad Pitt's character finding them. I'm just wondering, in terms of this kind of coming of age tale that also has elements of a cautionary tale to it as well, in terms of, how Johnny develops as an adult. He really goes through this process of self discovery and also of growing up and finding his own identity. Were you aware of that influence at the time you were watching it? Or do you think that this kind of more fun fairy tale, absurdist humor was what marked you more, and that it took time to realize the film's impact on your own sense of self?
Oh,
I mean,
and additional question: do you own a pair of suede shoes yourself?
I don't own a pair of suede shoes. I would if I found the right pair. If the right pair fell into my life, let's say, I would. But
Still waiting.
yeah, yeah, I'm still waiting for them to arrive. I mean, I think that, when I was young, I wasn't really looking for the subtext and things, and I still am not like I'm not someone who um tries to resolve the meaning of things, and I've that's a
Hmm.
something I've learned from watching a lot of Lynch's films is like I'm not interested in decoding those films. I'm not interested in decoding things. I'm just interested in letting them sort of wash over me. That being said, the subtext of that movie did really hit me when I got a little older. But initially, the thing that drew me in was that rich world.
Hmm.
But I think that there's an ambiguity in the richness of that fantasy world and that fairy tale about Johnny Suede that is like part of what I think compelled me so much to it, because it felt also very grounded. Like, the shoes fell out of the sky and there's something magic about that. But
Hmm.
also people throw away shit out their window
Hmm.
and like it's garbage, and that can happen. And so it could be either of those things, and it was also both of those things. And I think that the the fact that nothing truly magic happens, but real things that feel magic happen in the course of that movie, that I think that's what really, struck me.
Hmm.
Mm. And speaking of magic, because I now know that you and I are the same age because you mentioned you were 16 in 96.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that the film so beautifully captures the magic of the art life in New York that was still possible in the 1980s, and then perhaps the tail end of that in the 90s. Did that sense of art life resonate with you, and does it still?
It did. I mean, I see Johnny Suede as being its own version of New York. Like, to me, weirdly, you look at Life Lessons, the Scorsese movie from New York Stories. And I feel like those are, I'm pretty sure they're contemporary to each other in terms of when they were made and came out roughly. And yet, to me, those are two totally different New Yorks. I don't feel like Johnny Suede is a character that would pop up in any other film. It is its own kind of, unique voice, its own unique world. But in terms of just the feeling of that, yeah, like I often really regret that I wasn't, I don't know, 10 years older and trying to make work in that world, in that sort of like downtown New York uh time and place that like I sometimes I'll look at there's that great part in the movie where he sees like a hand, Mexican hand on the ground, and he reaches down to pick it up, and that's one of those, like, that's something that you could just find walking around, but it's also has a kind of a magic to it.
Yeah.
And in terms of the location itself, like, I know that a lot of that stuff is now built up and kind of, is probably like crappy condos, things like that. And just the sort of uh the feeling of the old crumbling world that was once there is gone, is kind of a sad thing.
Yeah, yeah, it captures a Williamsburg that doesn't exist anymore.
But
Right.
there's something very empty about the space in which he lives, something of a no man's land, which you've mentioned that you like very much Twin Peaks. And to me, there was something very Lynchian to a certain limit in the environment in which he lives, and also in the music and in the feel of the 1950s and 1960s. This time when I watched the film again, I was really struck by the Lynchian connections. I don't know if this is something that you yourself see or if it's just me.
I do. I mean, I think that by then I was very absorbed in Lynch's world. I was just um I think I started watching Twin Peaks when I was like 13.
Mm.
And the only way I could watch more of it, things, was when I would go to Suncoast Video and buy something on VHS, and I would watch Blue Velvet or Elephant Man or whatever. And so by then I was looking for that. I was looking for things that echoed that uh everywhere. and that was something that was a part of that. I mean, Johnny Suede himself is sort of like a, he's got the Eraserhead haircut in a way, and which is actually funny because there's a photo of Brad Pitt as Eraserhead that exists, and I always like to think of it as like a, I don't know, Elseworlds combination of the two,
Yeah.
but uh, yeah, no, I definitely see the Lynchian connection there, and he's, there's a little person in the film, and then there's that kind of scene that sort of, I think, comments on that in Living in Oblivion a little bit. So, yeah.
And just his interest also for clothes, to me, is reminiscent of Sailor to a certain extent, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was that also that preoccupation with the 50s in the 90s, I think, in the late 80s and the early 90s. There was a big preoccupation with it because it was only 30 years before, which is weird because you think of them as being so much further apart. It felt like deep history, but um, and I don't think we really have that in terms of previous generations going on now. I think there's just too much information for that sort of cultural backslide and reference to be happening on such a full scale kind of way. But yeah, and an interesting thing that I learned about it was that the clothes in the film, I think, were all Tom's clothes,
Mm.
and um and that they all just happened to fit him, and so Johnny's wardrobe was just things that Tom uh owned.
Mm. Mm.
So perfect. I'm glad you mentioned Living in Oblivion because I always think of Johnny Suede and Living in Oblivion as kind of brother films that can be paired in interesting ways, really looking at the kind of
Mhm.
passion of indie DIY arts culture. And I'm wondering, as a musician, do you feel like Johnny Suede might be to the music business what Living in Oblivion is to the film business?
Only partly. I mean, um, only partly because I don't see the music business as being so central to the plot as the film business is in Living in Oblivion. But I do think that like some of the illusions and the heartbreak about that, and the sense of identity as a musician, that you sort of like see yourself one way and then somebody sees you totally differently, and it uh messes with your head, and it kind of distorts your self-image. And I think that uh oddly, from an emotional standpoint, as a musician, I think that Johnny Suede speaks to that side of it very, very acutely, because of what it's saying about ego, and male ego especially.
Hmm.
Mm.
I think it speaks to that for me, and has spoken to it in different ways over the years,
Mm.
um, because Johnny is just so um, like he's not stupid,
Mm.
and Brad Pitt doesn't really play it as stupid, I think, but he's immature, and
Mm.
he's just like openly immature, and it's like he's learning, and you're kind of rooting for him to learn. And in terms of the music business side of that, you know, just the like the whole High Tone Records thing, and their band practice, and the way he talks to Calvin Level's character, whose name is Deke, way he talks to him about um what they're going to do with the band, like it's all illusions, and it's all these extra layers of his identity, and his ambitions, and what he really wants. And I think that uh, uh, as an young aspiring musician, I had to kind of be honest with myself about what I really wanted, and what part of that was actually fame, and what part of that was just uh, love, and people thinking I was cool. And I think it's okay to want those things too, but you also have to kind of like bring in the reality of life. And I think that's where uh, Catherine Keener's character comes in and sort of like brings that real life aspect
Yeah.
into the story.
What is your take, talking about the learning process, concerning Johnny at the beginning of the film and Johnny at the end of the film when he comes back to Yvonne, after he went away for a little while?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah. What is your take on how Johnny grows through the film, when you compare the beginning of the film, the way he is at the beginning of the film, with his return to Yvonne at the end?
Right. Well, I think in the beginning of the film, he uh he has a good self-image in insofar as who he thinks he is and who he wants to be, and he wants other people to see that.
Mm.
But he goes to the nightclub, and everybody's wearing underwear on their head, and it things just like he I think he feels like, if only there was like, if only he could find the one thing that he's missing, then he would have everything, and then he could figure it all out. And I think that by the end, he has accepted that he has a lot to learn,
Mm.
and um and that some of the things that he wanted were um were illusions after all.
Mm.
But in that final moment, I think, there's also the scene where he kind of like overreacts, and he hits her, and he's sort of dealing with that, and that was connected to all of those other things, and he has to sort of reconcile the best and the worst of himself, and face face those things and face her.
And what about the role of dreams in this process of growth?
I think that dreams in film are an opportunity, and dreams in life are a very different
Mm.
thing. And I
Mm.
think that the it's interesting because there's two distinct dreams that are very different from each other in this movie. And the first one is kind of cliche and has a little person in it, and has like, just feels like how someone would tell their dream or write their dream. And then the other dream that he has feels more like an actual dream in real life. And it has one of the most like powerful moments in any film I've ever seen. And it's the part when, after he's hit her and he runs away and he's in the cafe, and we don't know that it's a dream. And we have that reveal where Yvonne comes and sits across from him at the table, and he looks down and she's bleeding, and he starts crying, and he gives this reaction. And then the camera sort of pans slowly up, and then there's a naked man sitting at the counter, and it just snaps you so far out of what's happening. But it's perfect, and it's not a laugh line either. Like, to me, it's interesting because it brings this absurd moment that happens at such a vital, painful moment for him of realization, and that feels like a real dream. Whereas the he was even in his dreams, he was sort of having illusions, and now he's having dreams without the illusions, and the absurdity of this naked guy, uh you know intruding on his like very painful moment, like that's more real. And I think that that's one of the most powerful, uh that's one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, and one of the most powerful scenes in any movie to me.
Mm.
Mm.
And it's also, sorry, it's also interesting because, I mean, the first dream is about Darlette, whereas the second is about Yvonne, isn't it?
Right. And Darlette is immature herself, and it's the sort of thing that he thinks he's after, and
Mm.
he maybe didn't know what he really wanted after all.
Mm.
Mm. Just thinking about this time period and the relationship between music and film, I often think of Jim Jarmusch, with whom Tom DiCillo, of course, was friends, and who collaborated on many of his films. Are you a Jarmusch fan as well?
Yeah, I really am. And I especially love um Stranger Than Paradise and that era. Um I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was just curious to know if you also, found parallels between the films and appreciated Jarmusch as well. And it's interesting, yeah, that DiCillo did much of the cinematography on those films.
I do. I mean, I see them as like completely different directors. You know, like I wouldn't get their worlds confused for each other, even in the sense that, like, I think that Tom's cinematography for Stranger Than Paradise is there are similarities to the minimalism of Johnny Suede and the kind of simplicity of the camera movement and it having a kind of uh, every place having a kind of a sense of being sort of like theater, but it's not the same. And yeah, I see them as quite different, but I do love Jarmusch's films, especially the early ones.
Yeah, I like to think of them as a constellation because I agree with you. They both have a really strong kind of singular aesthetic sense, but you do get the feel that there are some mutual interests that overlap, and it's nice to kind of take them in as a distinct constellation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems to me that Tom DiCillo is really into fairy tales, and that perhaps Jim Jarmusch is a bit darker in his vision of the world. Would you agree with that?
Would I agree that Jarmusch is darker? Yeah, I think I would. Though neither of them I would count as cynical. I
Mm.
think uh, I I I think that I find Tom's films to be more personal.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you think it's that autobiographical element that he's pretty transparent about, at least with Johnny Suede and Living in Oblivion?
Yeah, I mean, I know a good amount about him. I read the book by Wayne Byrne that came out that was really good, and I have all the other books, the like the screenplays and things like that that came out with the film journal. But I can't, like, I try not to presume too many things, because I don't know him and I don't know what it is he's specifically trying to reveal about himself. He's spoken a bit openly about that in places, but um, the personal nature of it is something that just feels like it's inherently there and intuitive and kind of um, connects with you right away just when you put it on.
Mm.
Yeah, it
Mm.
feels like a very generous approach in terms of allowing people to have that instant connection, as you say.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you mentioned briefly Nick Cave. What can you tell us about Freakstorm?
uh, well, I love that Freak Storm is kind of like a mirror image or even maybe a negative image of Johnny Suede in ways. And he has the things that Johnny wants. And he literally looks like the negative image of him in the sense that he's sort of this he's wearing like white and has, a white hairstyle, but it's the same as Johnny's hairstyle. And he sees in him this thing that he's like, oh, this guy has all the things that I want. But then he meets him and he's kind of a jerk
Mm.
and been a little abusive. And um, uh, I've definitely experienced that
Mm.
in my music life. I've definitely um, seen people who had the things that I wanted and felt like there was an image of me that I saw myself in them, and then I got there, and uh, you know, I only saw the worst of myself in
Mm.
in. Uh, I love that character though, and I love the when they meet in that kind of like back alley that feels itself like a little theater space, and they're like theater in the round, and they're and he's singing and um yeah.
And I've always found that really interesting that one of the first times that we see Nick Cave on screen, it's obvious that Johnny looks up to him and he has the kind of self-assured confidence that Johnny hasn't yet developed in himself, and he's a little bit more polished, etc. And at the same time, it is Freak Storm who's looking at Johnny with suspicion, who seems it's kind of a reveal of his insecurity as well. And I've always found that really interesting, and maybe that really indicates the extent to which DiCillo is so great at creating complex characters that, really, really have these multiple sides. We're never going to have a simplistic sort of caricature, even when the character is funny and absurd, like Freak Storm.
Right, and I like that because you're right. Like I think on the surface, it could be he could be very much a caricature, but he shows his sort of I don't know if I would say that he's like jealous
Mm.
of Johnny necessarily, but I that he's kind of yeah, suspicious of him,
Yeah,
and
really
uh
showing that.
as you would be if someone who like looked up to you came around and looked, had your look and things like that.
Mm.
What do you think about Brad Pitt's performance in the film?
I think it's terrific. I think that um it's strange to me that this is not as well known
Mm.
uh in his work. Everybody cites Thelma and Louise as being the first thing, and that may have come out first, but I know that this was made before it. Um, I think it's a fantastic performance. I know that um, Tom had like at one point I think had some issues with it. Like I think that they had even like had a difference of opinion about where to go with it, but ultimately what what exists in the movie is whatever the dynamic was between the two of them, what exists in the film for posterity is something really special. And I think that he he does this great job of playing immaturity with compassion. It's very um it would be very easy to play immaturity as stupidity or in a sort of parodying way, but you are rooting for him, in the movie, even when he's doing things that you don't want him to do. Like you're rooting for the character, and I think it's especially evident in that dream sequence when he breaks and just like kind of falls apart in that moment, and he sells it during an absurd moment. He sells something really dramatic, and so I think it's uh, still one of his best performances. But
Mm.
that's also because it's my favorite movie. So
But I agree with you, and obviously Miramax did too, since legend has it that Pitt's performance was really the deciding factor to convince a Miramax official, without Harvey Weinstein having even seen the film, to distribute it. And
mm,
I'm always grateful to those Miramax distributed films of the 90s because for me, in the kind of pre or early internet days, that was a real mark of indie artsy film that I knew I could count on. I mean, I really looked to their films as kind of recommendations for what to watch. I don't know
yeah.
if that's the same for you.
Well, we certainly got a lot of them in Springfield at the Fox Theater, and I saw a lot of those there, and um, that was, yeah, I was fortunate to have that and to have Bravo TV and
Mm.
to some degree Facets Video in Chicago, which was a place where it was a video catalog where you could you know look things up and order them, and they would send it to you, and you'd have to send it back and everything. But
Mm.
yeah, and I'm curious what you guys think of the director's cut versus the original cut with the voiceover and all of that stuff.
Mm. Gosh, I need to revisit both versions.
The original version, the theatrical version that came out, it starts with the narrator's voice, and it's like John Beeman, blah blah blah, and
Yes,
it talks
yes,
about him, and then we like never hear that again until I think the end.
yeah.
It like bookends the film, and I guess Tom hated it. Um, I never minded it, but I do think it's a better film. Um, I do think it's a better film for not having it, and I think it puts more in our hands as an audience to not have that voice of God
I
thing.
agree. It's coming back to me now because I think the very first iteration I ever saw was the theatrical cut with the narration, and I think they used that in the preview of the film as well, like that kind of bookends the preview, if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, on one hand, not knowing what Tom's preferences were, because of course I'd always fight for the artist to have final cut, of course, but not knowing his preferences, I think that it lends something to the fairy tale aspect of the film to know that you're kind of going into this sort of fantasy space, which is interesting, but at the same time, in recent years, I've only been watching the director's cut, and to be honest, I had forgotten about that initial
yeah.
theatrical
Well,
release.
I think it starts off giving a very like once upon a time
Yes.
kind of thing to it, and I think that Tom is right in understanding that like once upon a time is inherently understood.
Yeah.
We don't need it. Like, and I I did like I think the only thing I liked about the voiceover was that it just validated what I already knew, which tells me that he was right about, that change. And the fact that I can't really remember any of the other changes that he made, which I think are just like minor cuts that for time, uh, you know, tells me that he was that yeah, that was
Yeah.
a good decision.
A bit like with David Lynch, I like it when the audience is left a lot of opportunity to read the film by themselves, that not too much is revealed and that we are able to interpret what's happening the way we want. And I do think that voiceover, unfortunately, ruins that very often. I have to admit, I've only seen the director's cut, so I can't compare with the one you're mentioning, but I do like very much the idea of not having someone telling me what I'm supposed to see.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that, that was uh, a big part of what drew me to Lynch when I was young was the trust that he places in the viewer and as an observer. And Johnny Suede has that all over the place.
Mhm. Is it just me, or each time the character Darlette appears on screen, there are birds singing? Uh,
Yes.
have you ever noticed that before?
Yeah, that is and I think Jim Farmer made that cue. I don't know if it's a sound effect or if Jim Farmer did it, but I love that. I love that that kind of just follows her around, and I like to think that that's kind of in Johnny's head.
Uh-huh. Did you think it has a special meaning about who she is?
I think it's sort of tied to her sort of like fairy tale Disney princess,
Mm-hmm.
innocence, image that he has of her. And, and of course that image is shattered, uh, later on.
So just to come back to the music briefly, was Johnny Suede your first introduction to Link Wray's recordings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. And I ended up using some of it in a movie that I made when I was young. I would make my own movies around the same time, on video. And I kind of stole that for my own purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I just love thinking about the history of Link Wray and his really innovative use of distortion and echo and the way that those motifs play into the film so perfectly. I just can't imagine a more perfect soundtrack.
Yeah, it really fills everything out really well and feels uh I think it just kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but I love Link Ray and I love the way it fits in the film.
I guess it's a mood that's just really hard to articulate verbally because the sound captures it so perfectly.
Mm. Would you say that the film has influenced you in one way or another for your music, its music itself or its mood?
Yes, I think that a good amount of my songs I I think exist in a a part of that film that is not on screen. I like to, I think when a film is over, you're sort of, it still exists, like a painting, if you were to go into a painting and beyond the frame line, right? Beyond the, the scope of it, that's the part that kind of lives in your imagination. And I think that I often kind of, in the same way that when you're having dreams, you're sort of making a, uh, collage of all the landscapes and architecture and textures and things that you've known in life. I think that is a very prominent one for me, and still very important in the work that I make. I know that sounds very vague. I don't know. I'm not meaning to be um, trying to be poetic about it or anything, but like it truly is. Like I couldn't cite to you, oh, this part of this scene or that scene, like, turned into this lyric or that melody or whatever. It isn't like that, but just that, uh, the all the possibilities that film suggests to me now and that they once did are very closely bound to the music I make and the things that I do and think about.
Yeah, you basically meet sometimes Johnny Suede in the Red Room.
Yeah. Yeah, in a kind of liminal space of the mind and the heart, I suppose that I do.
Mhm. I'm always thinking about how great films of the past, including recent decades, can appeal to younger viewers, or how I can encourage younger viewers because I teach film. And I'm just wondering, for you, what would you tell to young people who have never seen Johnny Suede before?
Oh boy.
We
Um
pitch this film to new generations.
I think well, I would be very careful. I think it's more important what I don't say. I think like a lot of the things that we've discussed here, I would not tell them to listen to this interview. I would tell them to go into it with an open mind, and I would um that's a good question. Because it's probably the film that I end up recommending the most to people. And it's like the film that I ask people if they've seen, and I always try to sort of like um push it on them. But for a younger audience, uh I don't I don't I think I would just try to make sure that they watch it, especially, I think rather than trying to tell them anything, I would just be asking them a lot of questions after they saw it.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Does that qualify as an answer?
I think it does, and I think just encouraging them to watch it is the right approach, because for me, it's a timeless film. I mean, yes, on one hand, it captures a certain period in the kind of flux or transformation of a neighborhood, but that's pretty secondary to some of the more timeless themes in the film that I think can appeal to anyone beyond any, age spectrum.
I think it's abstract enough to reach people at whichever point in time they are, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's part of why it has stayed so firmly. I watch it at least once a year, often more than that, and it stayed such a kind of pivotal thing for me. Um, when I first watched it, like we were talking about, I none of that subtext about Johnny's maturity or any of that, was really what I was attracted to.
Mm.
I just saw a guy who wanted to be cool and was trying to be cool, and he looked cool to me, and I wanted to be cool, and I had my own ideas about what that was. And his you might say that Johnny was sort of like my freak storm in a way, like I like the just the that whole appeal like looked really good to me at that time. And then when I got older, I think I kind of understood, and I had like real relationships with like real women, like I understood uh more of like what his journey was from the beginning to the end. And then, once I'd sort of been uh in music and playing shows and trying for those things and wanting those things that he wanted, like I think I understood some of those aspects a little more. And it's not like they were unknown to me, but I think they just spoke to me in different ways over the years.
Yeah.
Plus, the film is funny, isn't it? I mean, I really like the humor in that film, and I know that as far as I'm concerned, it's a great portion of why I like Johnny Suede. Is it your case too?
It is funny, but it's not like, I think the things that are funny in it are funny within the movie. They're not gags for us. They're funny things inside of the context of the movie. But yeah, I do find it funny. I think that the uh some of Johnny's immaturity is really funny, like the way he's sort of talking to Deke when
Mm.
they're painting the apartment, and the way that he deals with some of the authority figures, like the landlord and the guy who's having him paint his apartment, and people like that.
Mm,
Mm.
mm,
I love what you said though about, discovering later in life some of the underlying substance in the film, but also that the aesthetic quality of the film, it just oozes cool. And I think Tom DiCillo is just one of those, fantastic artists who tells us that we don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
mm,
And, maybe one thing is what draws you into the film, but over time, you just keep discovering different nuances to this film. I mean, every single time I watch it, and I know I've seen it at least 100 times, I see something new that I didn't catch at an earlier time, or maybe it's just a different point in my life and I'm ready to receive the material differently. But it's a rare bird when a film like that comes along, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like that idea that it says that you can have both, and I think that by the end, that's what he's trying to do. And I love the image of the shoes going away on
mm,
the car.
mm.
Are the is it one shoe or is it both?
One shoe, yeah. Mm,
And and that, something's been lost, but through that loss he's gained, something else, and that the way I'm describing it sounds very heavy-handed, but it's actually really really nice the way that comes across in the film.
mm.
Absolutely.
He's learned humility to a certain point, hasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Oh, well, thank you so much for discussing the film with us. Before we close our hour together, we always like to ask the question, is there something we didn't ask that you wish we had?
About the film
Yeah.
or
Or
yeah,
any.
geez. Well, I think if there was anything that you didn't ask, I I I know that if I were listening to this, I would want to make sure that I had said that it was based on his monologues, that
Right.
that's where it had originated,
Yeah.
and I'm just putting it into the cosmos right now, that I want, one of the things that I want the most in this world is like some poster or program from that original. That's the thing that I'm like trying to find, is like an original program from
Yeah.
his one man show of that. But
Wouldn't that be amazing? I wish there were better documentation of that. I'm so curious about it.
well, there's so many things that that have been lost, so much media and things like that, that I I I would love to just go back in time and catch that show. And I'm curious what the differences are between
Mm,
that and
mm,
final film were, um and um and I also kind of wonder how Tom feels about. I mean, I've heard him speak about it. I think he still really loves the film and is really happy about it. But um, I go back and think about the first record that I made, and I still have a fondness for it. And I also kind of pick on it,
mm. Yeah.
inwardly, and things like that. And I think that's another aspect of it, because he did a really great essay for this book called My First Movie, where he talks about the making of it, that I like to go back and read once in a while.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. I find a lot of insight in that, and I think that uh, it still fascinates me as a first work, as a kind of a really towering first work, uh, from
yeah.
somebody, and um, I take a lot of inspiration from that.
And that's actually another question we haven't asked. You just mentioned your first record, but what are you currently working on? What are your projects?
Oh, well, I have a record coming out December 5th, called Mercado 48, which I recorded here in Porto.
Mhm.
And uh, the first single for that is already out. It's called Alligator. And um, the next single is coming out just in a couple of days, on November 5th, and that's called Don't Fucking Move. And so that's coming out, and that's going to occupy a lot of my time, hopefully, with some shows coming up. And then I'm trying to organize. I curate a David Lynch retrospective that I've done in Chicago and some other places. I'm trying to do some more of that and bring that back to Chicago and maybe to Porto in the future.
Oh,
Wonderful.
fantastic. And for those who would like to listen to your music, what's the best way to support you? Are your works available on Bandcamp, or how would you like people to listen?
I am pretty much everywhere where you are looking for music. You can purchase physical merchandise from me on Bandcamp, danielknox.bandcamp.com, and I am on all the streaming services. So that would be the best way.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to hearing the new album. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to After Images. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and follow After Images podcast on social media.
After Images.